Welcome, everybody. My name is Jeanette Banishak, and I am one of the co-founders and co-directors of the Spiritual Guidance Training Institute.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jan Lundy, and with Jeanette, I am the co-founder and co-director, yes, of the Spiritual Guidance Training Institute, with an interfaith, interspiritual, intercontemplative focus. So, welcome to everyone.
Well, it's my great joy to introduce Kaira Lingo. I'm going to read an introduction and then pass it off to Kaira to lead us in a practice. Kaira Lingo began practicing mindfulness in 1997 and teaches Buddhist meditation, secular mindfulness, and compassion internationally. After living as an ordained nun for 15 years in Thich Nhat Hanh's monastic community, Kaira teaches in the Zen lineage and the Vipassana tradition at the intersection of racial, climate, and social justice with a focus on activists. Black, Indigenous, people of color, artists, educators, families, and youth. That is all of her focus and the intersection. Now based in New York, she offers spiritual mentoring to groups and is author of the just released We Were Made for These Times. Skillfully moving through change, loss, and disruption from Parallax Press. We are so thrilled to have you with us today, Kaira, and please lead us in, begin by leading us in a practice.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really good to be here with all of you. So I'll offer us a practice that is based on my teacher Thich Nhat Hanh's core teaching. He said everything I teach comes down to one phrase: I have arrived. I am home. So this practice of not running into another place or another time, but arriving in this moment right where we are, acknowledging that there's nothing else we have to have or be or get or achieve or become to be okay, to be happy, to be solid, that we can be free by redirecting our attention to our body, our breath, to really come home to this moment, to be fully here, body and mind together, that we don't need to arrive somewhere else, to be okay, to be content and satisfied. So, I'll offer some guidance to invite us to settle in, and part of the meditation will be some guided phrases that you might like to try with your in-breath and out-breath. So there'll be a phrase with the in-breath, a phrase with the out-breath, and then you can abbreviate it to a key word with the in-breath, a key word with the out-breath. And if that's not helpful for you to try to combine it with the breath, you can just feel it in your body, the words, let go of the breath, because sometimes it's not helpful for everyone. So just inviting you to really take your seat in this moment, to help your whole being to land right where you are. Allow your body to come into stillness. And feeling the position your body is in, just noticing how you're taking up the space that your body takes up, your posture, the places of contact you're making with whatever is supporting you. Maybe taking 3 deep breaths to also claim your right to be here, to be held in this space by the atmosphere around you. And with the out breath, just letting your body release its weight and seeing if there's any tension that wants to be exhaled from the body. And so whatever you were doing before this session, just seeing if you can really release all of that and allow all the different parts of yourself to settle in this moment, right in this place where you find yourself. Just like a snow globe that's been shaken up, and then you set it down and the snowflakes slowly begin to settle at the bottom. So breathing in, I have arrived. Breathing out, I am home. Continuing with the key words, arrived, home. Allowing the words to flow with you in the silence. There's no other place I need to be. There's no other thing I need to be doing. That is why I can say I have arrived. And I am home. I'm coming home to myself, caring for myself, taking the all-important pause to welcome myself home. Arrived home. landing, settling more and more into this moment, right here, right now. We'll close this practice with the sound of the bell, letting yourself receive this sound and deepening the sense of coming home. Thank you for your practice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we want to turn our attention towards this wonderful book and your work in the world that fills this book. The title alone really makes us sit up and pay attention, I think. We were made for these times. And yet I imagine some of us might also resist that, to say, I didn't think that this was what life would be like at this time, or I don't know that I'm made for these times. So could you say a little bit about how the book came to be, and what is your highest hope for us as we dive into your words?
Sure. So the book came out of a course that I made for Insight Timer. And when I was approached to make a course, I was like, well, what do I know that I can talk about? And I said, well, I know how to go through times of transition and change. And so then just different pieces of what helped me in really difficult times, they just started to come together as a path, that had really been supportive for me. And so that course then emerged as a book and then it evolved a little bit from the course, but it came out the day after the pandemic was declared, the course on Insight Timer. And I didn't know it would be received so so wholeheartedly by people who were finding themselves suddenly in very different circumstances than they expected to be in, like trapped in an apartment for 3 months, on lockdown, and all the lessons were really exactly what they were saying they needed in that really tough time. So it was kind of a special mystery about how that timing worked out to be right there when many people were really in need. And in terms of the times we find ourselves in, and the the trust that this title expresses, right? It's not that far from the meditation we just did. That practice, I have arrived, I am home, is a profound practice of trust. Because how do you say those words when you're in a situation you don't want to be in? How do you cultivate that practice of coming home when you don't feel like you're at home, right? But the power of the practice, we were made for these times, is claiming that there's always a part of us that exists that is bigger, deeper, more than the smallness that we experience ourselves as when we meet difficulty. So when we encounter these tight places, these the rug pulled out from under us, the disappointment, the loss, the grief, that really needs to be honored and cared for. And there is the capacity in us to do that, to be there for these parts of ourselves that are really struggling. And what is able to do that, responding to the pain in us, is this bigger, vaster, really solid part of us that we need to cultivate a relationship with, that we need to give space and time to emerge. But it's always been there. We don't have to go somewhere else to get it, or we don't need someone else to give it to us. So it's this innate goodness is one way some traditions talk about it. It's the Buddha nature in each of us. It's the divine in each of us. And so that is what is made for these times, right? That capacity to connect with reality, regardless of whether it's what we chose or what we didn't, and to meet it with an open heart, with willingness to be shaped by it, to be in dialogue and relationship with it, and to be transformed by it, right? It's when we push it away, when we fight it, that we get hurt. We get hurt more, right, than the original hurt. But if we can flow with what's happening, it doesn't mean we can't still do things to bring about new outcomes. It's not like we're just passive, but we are we're open to learning and receiving what this moment is, what this hardship might bring. And that wisdom is in each of us, that capacity to do that. And that is why we can say we were made for these times, because we have something that is strong enough, no matter what it is, that is strong enough to encounter these times, whatever they are, with wisdom, with curiosity. Why am I here at this time? Right? Many traditions say it's not an accident that we are born into the times that we're born into. So why are we each here in this time? Maybe there's a reason. And especially those of us on this path of spiritual mentoring, spiritual direction, there's really, this is a really important moment for folks in this line of work to be manifesting, right? Because people really are in need of direction and being met and being witnessed. So, yeah.
I have so appreciated reading your book. It's one of those that I'm taking with me, or I took with me wherever I went. And it was like a friend to me. And in your book, you have at least 10 practices that you provide. You have memoir, some story, some autobiography, some journaling prompts. And it's just, it is rich on so many levels. And I think about it in my sessions with my seekers, directees, companions, friends. I'm wondering about this, whether you're like in a one-on-one or in a group mentoring session. Is this notion or sense of home something that you try to cultivate within the relationship? Like this container that we're co-creating is like home. Is that something that you consider and discern and bring to your relationships?
Yeah. I think the more we each connect and develop that relationship with the home inside of us, this true home of our inner stability, our ability to really be there for ourselves, the more we can really offer that and create that, as you said, with others, so that it's really, to me, a change in culture. It's a culture shift where, as we develop this relationship with our own home inside, that's really a cultivation of deep listening. It's the ability to really respond to whatever's arising. Like sometimes there's a lot of stuff going on underneath the surface, and it takes a special kind of listening to start to notice, oh, that interaction left me feeling funny. I don't quite understand why, but I noticed something, right? Whereas without that listening, we wouldn't catch that. We wouldn't notice those things that are happening, but they're beneath the surface of our awareness. So the same happens in groups, right? Where the more that sense is refined, then in an interaction, someone might say, when this was said or when this happened, I noticed this in my body. Maybe there's something. I was just in a retreat that I was leading, and someone shared this, and I was so grateful. They said, I'm feeling some tension in my body, and I think that's a reflection that the group has something that we really need to work out. And she was totally correct. Yeah. And I was so grateful. But she could say that because the space was becoming safe enough, not totally safe. I don't think any place can be totally safe because harm happens. It's what humans do, as skillful as we try to be. But it was this deepening of the listening among us that allowed the courage, the safety enough to say, there's something we need to look at in the group. So that's creating a home where people can point out, there's this thing that's wonderful that I'm noticing, and there's this thing that's feels somehow off, and can we hold that? So it's not about blaming or shaming or judging. It's about saying, hey, there's this thing that doesn't feel quite right, and I treasure everyone here, and I want to be in right relationship with everyone. So can we look at this? Maybe it's two people who need to have a discussion on their own, but maybe it's the group that needs to work something out collectively. So, another thing that happens as people feel welcomed to show up more and more fully as who they are is, I heard someone share this once, in the sharing time, the group sharing, like a circle share, people said, I'm sharing things I didn't even know were in me because the listening is so deep. Or things, we start to be able to make connections, to connect the dots in ourselves in the process of sharing or hearing someone else, or even in the silence. Things start to realign in us because the space is open, there's some silence, there's some there's the not knowing that's allowed in the space, where it's okay not to know. It's okay for things to emerge that we haven't planned, that we aren't controlling, right? And so healing can start to happen. And so yes, that is something that really that coming home in a group only happens when people also in themselves are coming home to themselves, right? Because we can create safety for others when we create safety for ourselves. Trust happens in a group when there's deepening trust in each of our own relationships with ourselves.
I hear you mentioning trust a few times, and I so appreciate that. And I know that we can be courageous, we can be brave when the space feels safe. And in some ways that's kind of like individual, like individually I feel safe, but it's also bigger than that. It's also the collective. One question that Jan asked our current students in cohort 5 last week during our virtual residential institute was related to what you were just talking about in terms of the deep listening. And she wondered if who in our students' lives had this kind of posture and practice of deep listening to them. And would you be able to answer that? Who for you emulated that?
Yeah, I love this question. A lot of people, I've been very fortunate. My teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, has really embodied this this just real spaciousness of taking me in however I was. And I felt, the listening could happen whether the other person was talking or not. he could be very perceptive about what was happening. And yeah, I'll just tell a story about this because it was so powerful for me. We were on a tour. I was a nun, and we were on a teaching tour in China. And I was going through a really rough time where I was really hard on myself. I was having just, when you just make a hell for yourself, it wasn't really something anyone had done or said specifically to me. It was me just feeling just so down on myself and not good about myself. And for some days this went on, and I remember just suffering so much. And I was entering the bus to go to this temple for the day. Thai would always, so we call Thich Nhat Hanh Thai, it means teacher in Vietnamese. He would always sit at the front of the bus to make sure the bus driver didn't fall asleep. He was this kind of caretaker for everyone. So I was walking up the steps and our eyes met. And in that one moment, I felt he saw me so deeply, and his eyes just transmitted so much compassion and love. You know how so much can happen in the split second, like in such a short time. Just his look, it was like he zapped me with his eyes.
Yeah.
And I felt like, oh my God, he knows all the suffering I'm going through somehow. And he's telling me with this one gaze, I am loved, I am enough, I am who I need to be. And it was just that quick. And I just moved down the aisle different. I found my seat and I was like, wow, I don't need to be so hard on myself. I don't need to tell myself this story that I'm not okay. His eyes just transmitted that, like, I'm loved. Mm-hmm. I belong. And that whole thing evaporated in just that instant. And that's a kind of deep listening that, you have to really make yourself emptied out to catch those moments, to be able to respond in those moments. Like if he had been thinking about what he was going to say in his talk or worrying about something on the tour, he wouldn't have been listening to me in that moment, right? So, and I still feel, even though he's passed away, that he's so present in me, in anyone who's been influenced by him in the world. That's really was a transmission of you practice and your teacher's always with you. So that's another kind of listening where you scatter yourself among all that exists. So that, whatever you have done is still available.
And he did it with just a glance. Yeah.
I'd like to remind you, if you have any questions that you would like to ask of Kaira Jewel, please type them into the chat. Kaira, one of the things that struck me when I first picked up the book and just read the names of the chapters, I'm just going to name a few of them here. Resting back and trusting the unknown. Accepting what is. Weathering the storms. Equanimity and letting go. I remember my first response was, those are big. Those are really big things. And I can imagine many people saying, oh, if only. I mean, and maybe even having resistance to the fact that they could actually do this, do any of these, accepting what is, for example, or letting go. And so what strikes me as I've read the book a number of times now is that you point out to us that there are certain foundational, perhaps core qualities that we do already have within ourselves, and that we can cultivate those, and those will help us step into these practices or these heart sets, mindsets that might feel really huge. So I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit about some of those core qualities.
Yeah, what wonderful question. I think one really important orientation is allowing, it's aligning ourselves with the reality, right? So this first teaching of the Buddha on the Four Noble Truths, it's really about coming to terms. The first noble truth is about coming to terms with, the fact that suffering exists. And, it seems so, why would that be an important teaching? But it's because there's so much in each of us that doesn't want to see the reality. And so we have, there's good reasons for that. We have many built-in defenses that we're not even aware of when it comes to suffering. And they may be ancestral patterns, they may be cultural patterns of defending against what's here. Maybe it's our own pain. Maybe it's someone else's pain. Maybe it's, we don't want to have uncertainty, but that exists. Uncertainty exists. We don't get to know everything, or we can't prepare for everything. And so one just helpful orientation is, difficulties are going to arise. And because we can't get to the fourth noble truth, which is that well-being is possible, right? Well-being exists if we don't accept the first one, right? And so if we can open to, okay, things are out of my control, and what am I going to do about that, right? We only get to that generative, creative question if we accept the first reality, that things will unravel. But there are things that lead to that unraveling that I can learn about. There are ways to strengthen myself, to be more resilient when those things inevitably happen. That's a way to prepare, is to is to just, and this is actually a practice I talk about in the book, The 5 Remembrances, in the chapter on impermanence. This was the Buddha saying, here's how you prepare for the unpreparable. No one is prepared, right? When the rug gets pulled out from under them. But if we recite the 5 remembrances, which is basically just reminding ourselves of all the things we don't want to admit are true, when the truth happens, we will have nourished this pliability in ourselves, this malleability in ourselves, so that we can absorb the shock of those truths, right? So the first remembrance is, I am of the nature to grow old. I cannot escape growing old. I'm at the age now where I'm like, oh, another one, another thing is changing that I didn't used to see in my body. Oh, okay, something else. Oh, all right, like all these things I don't get to control. No, it's. But if I turn my attention to that, the Buddha said, recite these every day. Make this your daily practice. If every day I'm remembering I am of the nature to grow old, I can't escape growing old, then when I witness the signs of aging in myself, I have preloaded a kind of openness, more acceptance, more equanimity to those things that, wow, there is a part of me that kind of wishes those things wouldn't be happening. That's what's in all of us, right? We wish to remain young, or younger. We wish to keep our physical abilities, our physical strengths, but those do erode, and so we stare that in the face. We don't look away and pretend it's not coming. And then the second remembrance, I am of the nature to become ill, to have ill health. There's no way I can avoid ill health. So again, when we are weaker, when we get sick, when disease comes to us, just having rehearsed that in a way, it's like, okay, yeah, this is part of existence, that aspects of my health are going to deteriorate. It's not this, a doomsday, like I can't do anything about, supporting my health. It's just accepting this is part of it. And so it actually can wake us up to, well, since this is unavoidable, what can I do today to support my health more than I might be, right? Not so that I can avoid any sickness, but so that I can, take good care of what's been given to me. Exercise, sleep enough, eat well as I can. These are things that remembrance can sharpen in us to say, hey, I have to take care of this impermanent and fragile body. And then the third remembrance, I am of the nature to die. I cannot escape death. So, really taking that in. I often find when I do this as a meditation, because I'll sometimes just bring it into my meditation, that's the one where I check out, where my mind goes into thinking. It happens so often. I'm like, that is so interesting. Like that's the one that part of me is like, I'd rather think about something else. And then really take in, I am going to die one day. All of this is going to end. But doing that can really support us to treasure our life, to treasure the life of those we still have, and to also really prepare ourselves to die consciously. One of the things my teacher used to say is, this practice helps us to prepare for a good death. We can actually prepare to have a good death. And that is all about having a good life, like living in awareness, living in an awakened way, so that when we die, we can actually stay present to the dying process. And I know people who've witnessed very dedicated practitioners describing to them what's happening to them as they're dying. They've been able to articulate, now, you know, the life is going out of my feet. Now the life is going out of my legs. Like they've been able to narrate their dying, you know, and very much as a practice that they had prepared themselves for. And so they were able to pass away very peacefully. And many people who weren't dedicated practitioners, you know, they have done this too. I know stories of people with no necessarily spiritual practice who have been able to leave this life with a lot of grace, a lot of light, where it's like a blessing for anyone that's in the room or in the space with them. But we have to come to terms with it, right? To do that, we have to look at it squarely and not be in denial that it's coming. And then the fourth remembrance: everyone that I love and all that is dear to me is of the nature to change. I cannot escape being separated from them. Yeah. So just accepting, gosh, things are going to change. People I care about are going to move away or pass away, or, you know, our lives are going to take different tracks. And then the last one: my actions are my only true belongings. They are the ground on which I stand. I cannot escape the actions, the consequences of my actions. Well, so just reflecting on everything we do has an effect, has a consequence. So that's one practice of really coming to terms with, you know, what part of us wishes weren't true, but it is true. It's the first noble truth. And when we do that, all the other truths reveal themselves to us. And that is really the path to well-being, to ease, to joy, to a fully embodied life that's in harmony with the way things are, rather than in resistance to the way things are.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for those wonderful reminders, and they are in the book, as you said, and they are powerful points of practice. We do have a question from someone, Lisa. Practicing mindfulness can so cultivate the openness to and comfort with deep listening and silence. What you are speaking and writing of can sound so mystical and perhaps foreign. Could you say how this might make sense to someone who does not also practice mindfulness? Or interplay, she says.
Sure. So, you know, I think the experience of stopping and taking things in, you know, the difference between being on your phone and rushing somewhere and seeing a beautiful sunset versus just looking at a beautiful sunset, and really, really letting yourself be nourished by the colors, by how they change, by the sounds. by what it feels like in your body as you witness this play of nature. There are moments like this every day, all throughout the day, where we can either be switched on, or on automatic pilot. When we're on automatic pilot, we're just not really deeply in touch with life. And we can switch to another mode very easily, very simply, by connecting to what's really there. We can do that with the beautiful things around us. We can do that with the difficult things as well. So when something painful happens, or when we get upset, we can go into our reactivity, that habitual place of complaining or railing against, or denying, suppressing, or we can go into this more spacious place of, wow, this hurts, or this is really uncomfortable, or I'm really upset by this. What does that feel like in my body? How can I really be attentive to this experience? Treating our own pain, our own discomfort, just like we would a dear friend who was upset, or a child that was crying. So whether it's something nourishing and magical about life, or whether it's where things get really rough, slowing down and taking in and being present for can really allow us to really integrate things that are really important. So one of the things that I notice when I do this practice, my partner and I do sometimes at the end of a day, it's based on a Christian practice called the Examine and Ignatian practice. And one of the things is to go back over your day and what are you grateful for? To recall that. So one day I was walking my dog and I just noticed, I happened to look up, which I don't often do on a walk, and I really noticed the clouds, the beauty of the clouds in the early morning. And I stopped, maybe I even took a picture, I can't remember, I think I did. But I really took in the clouds, which isn't something I'd normally do. And then I forgot about that and I went on with my day. But at the end of the day, when I thought about what am I grateful for, I remembered looking at the clouds, and I got to have that moment all over again in an even deeper way. I was like, oh, that was this really special thing. I haven't thought about it the whole day. I would have completely forgotten about it. But it got to come up and nourish me once again because I remembered I was looking for that, scanning through my day. What am I grateful for? What happened that was good? So that strengthened in me, right? So then you can see how a pattern can start to build, where then I'm on the lookout the next day for more things that can nourish me versus for things that I don't like. It's just a matter of orientation. Doesn't mean I ignore things that I don't like or I push them away, but just having that orientation towards, well, these things really nourish me. Let me make more room for them. Because when we make more room for them, we have more room for the difficulty too. We have a more settled nervous system. We have more resources available to hold the difficulty. So all these are just kind of, I think, very concrete, mundane things that don't sound too mystical for how to just have more happiness, have more peace, and to be able to encounter the difficulties with more resourcing.
Well, Kaira Jewel, we are getting up to our time. I have about 100 more questions. And I will, do you have time for one more?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We can finish with this question and know that we'll put a comma at the end of this and know there can be more. There are folks on this call, students and former students, who are interested in bringing injustice into their sessions, into their one-on-one and group spiritual companionship. And I wonder if you could talk about how you do it, how you do that.
Bringing injustice in terms of addressing social injustice?
Yes. So do you have, is it because of your bio that someone might be interested in meeting with you because they also have interest in issues of justice? Do you talk about it? Is it an orientation, a posture that people bring? How do you bring it in?
Well, I do think, people will be drawn to work with me because of, if they have an interest in, say, addressing racial injustice or climate injustice, or, because they see certain things that I've done or talks I've given, or, that I'm caring about that and I'm speaking to that in my work. And then one of the ways it comes up too, I'll direct people's attention when they speak to, I'm having this personal experience of struggling in, say, an institution or in this community or whatever it might be. Like, I feel I need to have this whole, way of presenting myself to be taken seriously. I'll reflect back to them that that's not just a personal experience, that they are also living within a system that is oppressive, and oppressive in terms of gender, patriarchy, oppressive in terms of race, having white supremacy as its foundation. And so I'll speak to how, there are ways that they can zoom out to see that their experience is not just a personal experience, but is caused by a systemic reality. So that's one way I might speak to it. And those are things that I also try to study and learn about myself, so that I have words to offer those perspectives, so that someone doesn't just think, oh, it's just I have a personal failing because I am vulnerable in this way, or I feel, limited in this way. I'll speak to the things that concern me about our world in our work together. Whether it's groups, whether it's with individuals, this sense of, naming that we really live in a time where structures are starting to crumble, and that the individual anxiety or upheaval that we're experiencing, it's not just ours alone. We are, like, with the pandemic, for instance, there was so much more psychological suffering that was apparent, in the whole human race. And so to just affirm people if they were struggling, like, it makes so much sense that this is your experience given what is happening in the larger reality. So that kind of witnessing and affirming and naming the larger reality, I think, is supportive to folks when they're wondering, why am I having such a hard time? What's wrong with me? You know? And then also offering ways to, you know, the self-compassion practices of noticing, you know, this is suffering, noticing that this isn't just something that's a defect in me. Every single human being has this same potential to feel this if the right circumstances arise, right? This is a human experience. So to this sense of broadening our little self to connect with the whole, and then to offer compassion for that, to, you know, to offer friendliness to that pain. So that's a kind of attitude we can also cultivate towards the suffering in the world. And that's something that I'll often do either as an ending of something with a group, is like a dedication of merit, where we call up, hey, these are all the folks that are suffering in our world right now. Let's send the good energy of what we've just done together to be of support to them. Or if we're doing a compassion practice for ourselves, we can include, there are other people also that are suffering in this moment. What does it mean to hold them in our consciousness with care, with support? So these are just some of the ways we can, this sense of broadening, you know? So we're not taking too much responsibility, and we're also allowing our heart to include the suffering of others.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
I do have to pop off now.
Yes, and thank you so much. We want to remind everybody to go to your website, kairajewel.com, and we will send them all the wonderful resources you sent us.
Great.
And thank you so much for your presence and the gifts you've shared with us today.
Thank you all so much. Very good to be with you.
Deep gratitude. Thank you, Kaira Jewel.
Thank you. Much care. Be well.